Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. And yes, where are you tuning in from? Hover over the map that you see on the left side of your screen and stamp so that we know who are we wishing good morning. It's morning for Pere, for Emin, for myself. Good evening to Ricard and to Ed. I hope I'm pronouncing everyone's names more or less correctly. Ellen is here. So all you have to do is hover over the map and simply click on your location there. The music you are hearing, you can control it as well at the bottom of your screen, so everyone can make it like louder or smoother. So you have full control over those things as well. Awesome. Perfect. We've got MJ and Lani joining, and Deborah is here. Now, next question before we kick it off. Are you part of an internal innovation practice at the moment in your company? Is it a yes? Is it a no? Or is complicated? Something in between? It's kind of an interesting situation. Again, stamp your choice. Beautiful. A bunch of yeses. That's awesome. Yes, see, I anticipated that there's kind of a some people will fall into the it's complicated bucket. Ricard and Emin and Deborah. Cool. Thanks everyone. And then I'm opening a poll, and as I will introduce Nathan and welcome you to the session, take a moment to reflect on what are the biggest challenges you are facing when it comes to innovation today in your practice, in your organization, whether you're part of an innovation team, you're leading that practice, etc. Feel free to take a moment and type your answers in the poll and click submit so it reaches our end. And let me kill the music here. If we haven't met before, my name is Anna Maria. I'm leading the Butter Community Project. I get to hang out with awesome facilitators, consultants, innovators, people working on really cool projects on a weekly basis. And it's my absolute pleasure to host the ButterMixer events, where we're inviting experts to share from what they've experienced so far, their lessons learned. And today's it's a very exciting and special session. I think I've been chasing Nathan now for a while on LinkedIn, and I was very happy to my invitation to share his learnings with us. The session is being recorded. Before we move on, feel free to keep your camera on if that's okay for you. Otherwise, keep it off. That's absolutely no problem. On the left side of the screen, you'll find the react button. Feel free to click those and give me a thumbs up if you found them. Yes, I see some thumbs up floating. Feel free to use them throughout the session so that Nathan knows, are you following? Do you agree, disagree? That was like a really hot insight. So use them. There's absolutely no limit for them. We have the chat below that. We're going to use the chat to capture questions throughout the keynote and surface them towards the end. Now, Nathan, I assume you've either know him personally or probably follow him as well, like I do on LinkedIn. Is the founder of the Customer-Driven Innovation and Growth from Method Dry and the author of Innovators Playbook, published by Wiley. He's an internationally experienced innovation strategist, facilitator, trainer, and speaker who's living in Sydney in Australia. He has run now over 100 innovation projects, thousands of workshops, and spent tens of thousands of hours leading and training innovation across most industries and continents with global giants and market-leading organizations, governments, etc. So he's bringing a wealth of knowledge, has tons to share with us today. I'm going to pop his contact details in the chat for us in a second. Nathan, thank you so much for being here. Over to you. We can also have a look a bit in the chat if you like and scroll through. The mic is yours. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Yeah, pleasure to be here, and yeah, great to have you all here this morning or this evening or yeah, whatever time zone you are in. So let's jump into it. See if I get this right. Here we go. Oh, okay. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. And Anna Maria showed me a cool little what is it, function that you can do. You can make the screen bigger or smaller if you like. So they're on your right hand side between the pictures of us or the videos of us. There's a little bar that you can slide to, which is pretty neat. Okay, let's jump into it. So we're going to talk about establishing a it's quite a long title, so I've abbreviated it for the title page, but a kick-ass design-led innovation practice. I think over the last few years, design and innovation have sort of morphed and merged quite a bit, even though there probably are differences. So I probably will use them interchangeably today. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. Some of our thinking in this space, Anna Marie's already mentioned our book. Also, our design thinking method card. So I've got, contact me and I'm happy to share with you a free copy of those method cards. If you do feel like buying a copy of the book, then you can find that in most bookstores and online stores. Anyway, without further ado, so let's jump into it. So what we want to talk about today, I keep on saying tonight, but I know for some of you it's the morning, is going through the age of the design practice and then 4 steps to establishing a kick-ass design or innovation practice. And then we'll have some discussion. But look, we're not a huge group, so feel free to jump in if you've got questions as we go. So obviously innovation is one of the most important endeavors of modern times, and I guess after the last 3 years, even more so. Yet, no matter who you talk to, innovation is really hard, and our success rates are really low, or our failure rates are really high. And as we try and improve those rates, we're trying to build this, I guess, this holy grail of an innovative culture, which is really quite tricky. So this is, I guess, an adaptation of the Danish design ladder, if you're familiar with that. And to get to the stage of building an innovative culture, we've seen the rise of the internal design or innovation practices. And so I thought I'd talk to you about, I guess, 4 types of design practice by contrasting funding, or the level of funding, and the level of mandate. And so on the x-axis there, you'll see level of funding, low to high, and on the y-axis on the left there, you'll see organizational-wide mandate. Now, I'm not saying these are the only parameters. You could cut it in different ways too. You could cut it like on, do you have a customer? Do you own, say, products or brands as well? But anyway, let's go with this one. So in the bottom left box, you've got low level of funding, low organizational-wide mandate, so quite a tough gig. So to survive in that territory or that zone, you've got to be quite guerrilla about it and quite underground. And so I wanted to share a role with you that I had with Claire and M&C Saatchi. So Claire were bought by M&C Saatchi just before the GFC, so a few years back. But great organization. I actually worked for them twice, once in London, and then I rejoined them in Sydney a few years ago. Now, they're a brand consultancy doing brand and innovation work, and I was, after a few years there, asked to set up their global capability and training offer. Didn't have a lot of funding for it. The idea was we could leverage all the consultants globally in their different offices. So they were in London, Amsterdam, Hong Kong, Singapore, New York, and Sydney. So the idea was we could leverage those consultants, and we could also sell some training projects off the back of some consulting work. But we didn't have a lot of funding. I had to leverage those existing resources. In terms of organizational wide mandate, so there were some of the exec who were supportive of this, but it wasn't in the top 5 priorities of the organization. And my role was to develop, some sales credentials and training and take that around the globe and sell it into the different offices to then sell to their clients. And it was a tough gig. And at the end of the day, it didn't succeed. And that was because the people in the organization, they joined to be consultants. They didn't want to be trainers. And, for those of you who do training and do facilitation, there is a difference. Some of us love facilitation, love consulting, advisory work, but we don't want to be trainers. It wasn't all doom and gloom. We did do a consumer insight program for all of Unilever's consumer insight people and marketers globally, which I think was about 5,000 people. So there were some wins, there were some successes, but yeah, without that funding and that mandate, it was a tough battle. And in the end, we closed it down. So the next one's low funding, but you've got the mandate. So that's sort of what I'm calling bootstrapping. And I had a role there with Unilever. I worked for Unilever in New Zealand, but this was a role I had with them in London. I moved to London from New Zealand back in 2000, and I always wanted to be a brand manager or product manager. And I had an interview, and I had offered 2 jobs. One was on ice cream, and one was on frozen veggies. And they said, "Which one do you want?" And I was like, "Well, ice cream, of course." So my kids are a little bit older now, but they think it's pretty cool that I used to be a brand manager or marketing on ice cream. Wait until I tell them I used to work in innovation for Heineken. They'll be into that in a couple of years. So anyway, the sad thing is, I got this job as a brand manager, as my dream job, and I had no budget. I was a marketer without a marketing budget. I mean, what do you do? And to be honest, I did get a little bit depressed. But then I worked out if I could come up with some new ideas with the team, new product ideas, then we could get funding for it. If you had a great idea, you could get funding and you could go all the way through the journey. So this was back at the time when I guess McFlurry ice creams at McDonald's were really big. And actually that's, Unilever's number 1 in ice cream, number 2 is McDonald's, and then I think maybe Nestle's third, etc. At the same time as we're seeing all this growth or share go to McDonald's and McFlurry, our R&D team had worked out a way of making like that Mr. Whippy soft serve ice cream. They worked out a way that it could still be soft coming out of a freezer at home. So if you go to a Mr. Whippy or soft serve ice cream van, it's about minus 12 degrees. Whereas if you put that ice cream in the freezer at home, it's about minus 18, it would turn to rock. So we had like the perfect storm of, consumer insight and some new R&D or tech. And, it became the top seller for Europe that year back in, I think, 2001 or 2 or something like that. So sort of an example there of, low level of funding, but you got the mandate. So you got to sort of bootstrap your way to success. The next one is where you've got high funding, but low organizational wide mandate. I haven't actually worked in a role or team where this has happened. I think it's sort of a isolated or a bit of a rogue sort of role. It could be an exec who's sort of like, stuff everyone else, I'm going to build this innovation team anyway, building their fiefdom or something like that. So we might see a little bit of that in large organizations, not picking on government, but maybe a little bit of government work as well. And then your dream box is obviously top right, like any consultancy box. So high funding, high organizational wide mandate. So you're pretty much empowered and you get on with it. So after returning from the UK, I got to set up the innovation team for DB Breweries, which was part of, as a Heineken subsidiary. So fantastic opportunity there where exactly to the graph, as it says, had the funding, had the mandate, so we could go out and innovate. And ideally that's where you want to be, but we as designers, innovators, we don't always find ourselves in that top right box. So have a think about which box you're in, and maybe there's some key lessons and tips there for you to be successful within that space. So if I was, I run my own practice now and I really enjoy that. If I was asked to, set up an innovation or an internal design team again, these would probably be the top 5 things I'd be looking for that I'd really want. It's probably the dream job. It's not often you get all 5, but I'd want design or innovation to be mandated from the CEO down. I'd want good funding. We don't need to be greedy, but, good funding so you got a budget. Ideally, I'd like I did at the Heineken subsidiary, have product ownership and a customer. A lot of the internal design practices are, like internal consultancies. So you're always having to, sell your services within the organization, which is really tough. I'd want to be integrated and aligned with the rest of the organization, so not just standing out as some special lab. There's a lot of innovation labs and venture labs these days, and you got to be really connected to the business to launch those new products and services, and for them to be successful and to be adopted by the rest of the organization. And then the fifth one, I'd want to be a top 5 priority and on the up. So, back at Clear and M&C Saatchi, like I say, it was a great organization, but that capability and training offer, it wasn't in the top 5. So you can see how it wasn't, prioritized. And I guess if there was a 6th one, no internal competition. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, working for one of the large consultancies, and we had a lot of competing offerings, and that makes it really tough as well. So we're going to jump into the main body of the presentation now, which is 4 steps to establishing and scaling a kick-ass design-led innovation practice. So I'm going to draw on 4 experiences and 4 stories. Some of them I've already touched on a little bit. So the Heineken one that I talked about, so that was a few years back, so establishing the product innovation team there. Better by Design is a organisation, or was an organisation, within New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Back in early 2000, New Zealand government set up a design task force to help New Zealand organisations be successful on the world stage. They felt they need to integrate design and innovation into their business models. So this was a team and organisation that did that by mostly working with small to medium enterprises. And then the next one's Commonwealth Bank. So the top, probably the biggest bank in Australia. I think they're in the top 10 globally. And what we did there is set up their design thinking and experimentation programs within their technology group, which is about 4,000 to 5,000 people. And then the 4th one is KPMG. So back in 2017, I was asked to come in and establish their design thinking or human-centered design practice. So I'll be drawing on those 4. So some quite different experiences. So the four critical steps that are common across all 4 of those experiences, and of course there'll be others, and people would have had other experiences, and there'll be other steps. 1, setting up your skeleton team. 2, setting your strategy. 3, it's all about selling, and 4, resourcing to scale up. So if we kick off with the skeleton team first of all, so as designers and innovators, and especially if you're leading a practice or you're an emerging leader, 3 of your real key and big responsibilities are to think, sell, and deliver. It's not always in that order. Often we have to do some selling, and then we go away and quickly do some thinking before we deliver it. But as experts in this area, if we're not thinking, we're not experts, we're not thought leaders. I'm going to dive into it more later on, but internal design and innovation roles are tough, so you're always selling, and obviously we've got to deliver. And the think and the deliver are probably the bits we love, but we've still got to do the sell as well. So what's the minimum you need to think, sell, and deliver when you're setting up? So if I go back to that role at that Heineken subsidiary at DB Breweries, so we had all the business as usual units of the organisation. Because it's consumer goods, innovation sat within the marketing team. And to get going, we had a head of customer insight, head of innovation, which was myself, and an innovation project manager. And that was enough to get going, obviously in a small country. And we were able to launch products from that. And then as we launched products, we grew and we brought more people into the team. But that was our skeleton team. If I look back at KPMG and when I joined them in 2017, so obviously you had the whole firm, a massive organisation. They are run as, quite separate countries. So even though you're part of, a global organisation, this was for Australia. Within Australia, they probably had the smallest customer practice of the big four. So, KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, and EY. And obviously there's others like Accenture, etc. So there was only one partner in a team of about 12 to 15. By the time I left 3 years later, there was, I think, 8 partners in a team of 150. And then through some other mergers and acquisitions, I think they narrowed a team of around 300 post-COVID. So they've really, grown and invested in that area. But that was our skeleton team. That's what we needed to get started there. So the next step, you got your skeleton team. You might have some runs on the board. You then really need to, if you haven't already, is set your strategy. So where are you going to focus? How are you going to win?
Oops, Bear, I think you clicked something. Okay, Nate, back
That's
to
all
you.
right. I'll come back in. Okay. So, I mean, a lot of you will be familiar with this, and I'll share some real world examples. So you want to set goals and timelines around what you want to achieve. I always feel like a portfolio mindset's best. So you're balancing short and long-term goals, with core and breakthrough innovation. It gives focus of, where you're going to focus, and outlines plans for developing each opportunity and roadmap. So another great tool, see the reference there, you'll be probably quite familiar with it, looking at core, evolutionary, and revolutionary innovation. So I think it's really important for your team to honestly define what level of innovation you're pursuing. If it's revolutionary, great. If it's evolutionary, that's great. And if it's core, that's fine as well. And there's nothing wrong with innovating around the core. Multiple core innovations can lead to an evolutionary or revolutionary innovation. A mixed portfolio, I think, is best. Continuously improving the core whilst also inventing what's next. You probably all know the what is it? Is it the BCG grid? And you got cash cows and dogs and problem child and stars and things like that. The best explanation I've had of that is you need money today and money tomorrow, and that's what the CFO wants to know, that you've got money coming in today and money coming in tomorrow. So if we are only focusing on the core, then we're going to have money today but not tomorrow. So we need to be focusing on horizon 2 or 3 or evolutionary or revolutionary as well. So one of my favorite tools for looking at setting up your innovation strategy and where you're going to focus is the 5 Ws. I believe this, I learned this from the team at Clear MNC Saatchi, and I believe this actually comes from journalism in terms of writing a good story. So you see here, you can come up with opportunities by looking at any of the Ws, but also combining them. So for example, who, so what new, existing, or lapsed customers do we want to target? Why, so what needs do we want to solve for? What new product, services, or technology exists that we can leverage? And then getting into the occasions. So what are the occasions we want to play in, and what are the locations we want to play in? So, if we look back at Heineken, that's the alcohol industry is very occasion led. So it's often about the when and the where. Is this Friday night drinks? I think Thursday's the new Friday here in Sydney anyway, because then you can work from home Friday a bit hungover. So people are very busy in the city today. I'm sure it's very busy tonight. Is it the barbecue? Is it the Sunday lunch? Those sorts of things. So which are the areas you want to focus on where you're not doing so well? So when I started at DB Breweries, we set up the strategy, and it was really important to co-design that with with as much of the organization as possible to ensure both that diversity of ideas, but also broad buy-in, because these are the teams who are going to be helping you develop and commercialize these ideas later on. So we went through a process that was more like this. We had inspiration, whether it was trends and insights and things like that, and then we'd bank out opportunities and we'd repeat that, and then we'd harvest those down like you would with the double diamond process, and then craft those up into innovation platforms or growth platforms. And then that would flow into our agile process. I'm joking, this is stage gate. It's very waterfall and linear. But yeah, that's sort of how it was done in the day. So in Australia, the tax office or tax organisation is called the ATO, so the Australian Tax Office. and they've got one of the oldest and biggest design branches within a government department or government agency. And I did some work with them during COVID. And what I love about what they've done here is they've really set up their strategy and matched that with the level of support they get. So if you look at the priorities line down the bottom there, so you see for high priorities or revolutionary type innovation, then the design branch will partner end to end with the rest of the organization that they're working with, and they'll work side by side. Whereas when you get down to here, like a medium priority or evolutionary innovation, they will guide you, they'll facilitate. And then if it's, low priority and just, core innovation, basically they'll advise you, they'll go, here's the tools, go and knock yourself out, and let you get on with it. Which I think is a great way of, when we're an internal design practice, we can't help everybody. So how are you going to triage the challenges or opportunities coming to you from other internal teams? So the third stage is to design we must sell, and it's interesting, talking to a group of designers and innovators, and it's not often that we get a presentation on selling. Some of us like it, some of us don't. I think I don't know if any of us like cold calling, but when we're in an internal design or innovation role, it doesn't really matter, which, not putting in boxes, but which box you're in. Selling is essential. And, what do I mean by selling? So, we're persuading, we're convincing, we're influencing. Often we're working across the whole organization, and you got to get that help and engagement from everybody, but you don't often have line authority over them. Of course, even if you've got line authority, you should be using persuasion and influence and passion and things like that as well. But in these roles, we really need to draw on all of those. So a couple of examples. So when I came into KPMG, it doesn't seem that long ago. I guess we all lost 3 years with COVID, but it seems just like yesterday. It probably was still in that bottom box, low level of funding, low organizational wide mandate, not as low as the Clear and Saatchi role was. Definitely, pushing over towards a bit more funding and a bit more organizational wide mandate, but it was still down in that box somewhere. And the gig I had, it was, coming in as a partner, as a lateral hire, establish and scale the human-centered design practice pretty much from scratch. Like I said before, there was already one partner in the business in that team, and a team of around 12 to 15. But within Australia, there's another 600 partners and 10,000 employees. So there was a lot of resource that we could leverage. So within these large consultancies, as partners or directors, there's a term you eat what you kill. So you get rewarded on what you bring in. It's probably a bit of a vulgar term, I don't know, but you got revenue KPIs of X million dollars per annum. And I was like looking at my little black book, of client contacts, and I'm like, I'm not going to be bringing in millions of dollars with that. Beforehand, I was running my own boutique practice. I didn't need to bring in millions of dollars to be successful. So the solution was to tap into the contacts of those other 600 partners. But the challenge or the barrier was, well, many of them were already hitting their targets, getting their bonuses. So why would they bother? Why would they bother with this design thinking thing? Why would they bother with, sticky notes and flip charts and all that sort of fluffy stuff? So I basically took a bit of a marketing approach to it. And so on the right there, you've got the marketing funnel or the marketing cone, and adopt a bit of a push and a pull strategy to find those key collaborators. So it was a mix of, 100 coffees or whatever in the first 100 days. So having a lot of coffees with a lot of people, going and presenting at any internal team meeting that I could. But also, doing some great work out in the market, which sort of created that bit of a pull strategy. The idea was, if I'd kiss enough frogs, I guess I'd find enough princes or princesses. And also not trying to convert the design heathens. So I hope you don't mind you using that word, but the people who are just, you're never going to get them over the line. They just don't believe in design. And then the other key thing was setting up design thinking leads in key teams and geographies, which is something that would have helped make that Clear and MNC Saatchi role more successful if we'd had those, capability and training leads in each market. So I rightly or wrongly, I decided to map the 600 partners. So using a 2x2 again. And what I went with here was mindset and ambition. So mindset, fixed or open, ambition, they're comfortable or they're hungry. This isn't perfect, but it did work well and helped us find the collaborators. So in the bottom left, you've got, the fixed mindset. They're quite comfortable. I've called them satiated cats. There's probably another word for that. There's a bit of a saying, isn't there? Fat cats don't hunt. So, they didn't need to bring in someone new. And then top left, you've got fixed mindset, but they're hungry, but they're quite tunnel vision on their thing. Often this was technology partners, which was interesting. And then heading over the right, you've got open mindset, but they're comfortable. So they're like, yeah, I'm open to this design thinking, Nathan, but make it easy for me. You've got to do it all. I might give you the intro or help with the pitch, but then you're running the project and everything else. And then top right was obviously the sweet spot, the people that we were really going to help with, and they were the collaborators. They had the open mindset, they had the ambition, they were hungry. So there were some partners that we did a lot of projects on. So once again, if you're in that internal design practice where you're, consulting or helping the rest of the organization, don't try and please everybody, I guess. Create your own 2x2 and work out, who your collaborators are and really focus on them and don't worry about the rest so much. So jumping back to Better by Design. So like I said, they were set up to create economic transformation by integrating design and innovation into small to medium enterprises. So in New Zealand, you've got Fonterra, which is the dairy company, and they're as big as tourism for New Zealand. And then you've got Daylight, and there's nobody else for a long way down. So the whole idea is one way of growing these small to medium enterprises was obviously by integrating design and help them compete on the world stage. So they had a fantastic program. And some of their winning initiatives were they had this sort of, it was about every 18 months, so not quite every 2 years, a CEO summit. They had some of the best speakers on innovation and design from around the world. So, the IDEOs, the Cheskins, we had, the CEO from Patagonia come along, Apple, IKEA, and then a lot of, successful small to medium firms in New Zealand who had either been through the program or were successful anyway. So that was the aspirational draw card, is sort of showing the art of possible. And then there was the CEO enrollment, which is sort of like gate one. So it was a two-way street. Better by Design would be checking interest, commitment, potential, and capability from that CEO and their organization. So are they truly passionate about this? Are they willing to give a full-time designer to, becoming a design-led organization, and have they got potential? So it wasn't like just anybody can come in. And then we'd run a 1 or 2 day boot camp. So it was like a try before you buy. So there'd be people like myself who act as, coaches or trainers or whatever with Better by Design. And so it was about generosity. But then also we were assessing the client once again at the same time. Are they suitable for this program? And they were assessing us. Is this something we really want to do? And that meant you had a higher success rate because the people who joined the program were really into it. Another element was the study tours. So, seeing is believing. So they'd run study tours up to Silicon Valley and then to New York every year. And they'd take the leaders from these small to medium enterprises up there to visit, some of the more innovative companies in the world. And then I guess the last element is that alumni. So you got that peer learning network, but also for people who have graduated organizations, there's opportunity to give back, the exemplars, case studies, study visits, and also staff swaps. So that was a program that worked really well. And this is like a summary on a page of that program. So you can see there, the enrollment, the gate one with the CEO, the boot camp. And then if you go through into gate two, we're then focusing on what, where are the gaps in your organization in terms of being a design-led organization. And you've got the plays, so you're actually building capability whilst working on live projects. And then there's waypoints before you go into the next play. And then obviously graduation and alumni. So that's, selling as designers. And then the fourth step, if you've got this far, if your design practice, or innovation practice still exists, having some wins, you need to scale up. So resourcing to scale up, we talked about what your level of innovation ambition is earlier on. So you really want it might seem obvious, but you want to create resources to match your innovation ambition levels. And this is, some stats from an article on, the HBR, which is 10 years ago now. But what we find works really well is innovating within, within the BAU units or for core innovation. That can just, happen within the BAUs, use their existing budgets. But then for breakthrough innovation, you really do need centralized teams and a funding model. But obviously, you still got to stay connected to the rest of the organization. So you need to design structures that accelerate those different types of innovation. So your breakthrough innovation, it requires that executive support. You need that executive mandate. It's going to require extra as well as different resources from running the core. And, you want to look at, do we hire people? Are we hiring? Are we also acquiring? Do we train? Do we partner? Do we network? Probably leveraging all of those to access the talent that you need to be successful in that space. So in terms of resourcing to scale up, so working with CommBank or CBA, they wanted to, their CIO felt if we're going to stay as a technology leader in the Australian market, then we need to build the innovation capability of our technology group, which was 4,000 to 5,000 people. And this is their competency model. So they have 4 levels, from aware to sound to advanced to expert. And they're roughly the amount of people we trained at each level. And so the expert level, we started with them because we wanted to have them ready for them when we trained everybody else. They actually had 11 days of training with us. They worked on real company projects. They did study visits. They then went through a train the trainer program. They trained aware, the bottom level, which was a half-day program themselves. So the experts trained them. And they co-trained sound, which was that sort of, in the middle there, with us. And that was 2 days of training. And then we trained the advanced cohort ourselves as well, who had 4 days of training. So just an example there. Obviously, that was a big project, but an example of scaling it through an organization or through a team. Lots of lessons learned from that one. Some of the challenges were a lot of people we trained, they had no previous innovation background. They were then like, how do I build my design thinking or HCD reputation? At the same, or during that journey, they set up their innovation labs. So some of those experts got to be coaches in the lab. So then they got to develop their reputation further, build on that training by applying it to more and more real life projects. We only trained the technology group. Innovation, as we all know, is a team sport. But what do? The CIO wants to train their group, and they've got the funding. So obviously we did it, and you got to start somewhere. But in the ideal world, you would train like you mean to play. So you'd train them together as cross-functional teams. It was hard for them to roll out design thinking on top of their day job. So this is for the experts and some of the advanced who had to train, the sound and aware levels as well. And then, you're training 4,000 to 5,000 people, so you're sheep dipping everybody. So, I don't know if you know what that term means, but, growing up on a farm in New Zealand, you're drenching or vaccinating, the whole flock, so, or herd. So when you're training everybody, you're going to get some holiday makers, and you're going to get some hostages. So, as well, because they don't always want to be there. It's key having the leadership involved in the entire journey. And as I said, it became the vanguard for success across the bank in a number of ways, including the setting up the innovation lab, and the experts became coaches in those labs or in that lab. Back to KPMG. Hopefully you're following the journey. I know we're jumping around. So resourcing there to scale up. So we started hiring, which was the smallest bit, an HCD, human-centered design team. the firm acquired a research consultancy. So, user researchers, strong qual and quant researchers. And then I guess the elephant in the room was training the rest of the organization. Remember, that was 10,000 people in Australia. So that's what we did. It was a mixture of hiring, acquiring, and training. And so this is the training program we put together. I worked with the internal people and culture team. We started off by recruiting. We made people apply for the program. You had to put an application in. We wanted them to put some skin in the game. I learned this from IAG, which is Insurance Australia Group. Some design thinking training we did with them. They made people apply. You had to come as a pair, as a duo, and you had to have a project to work on, which I thought was a really neat idea. There was limited spaces, so we created that scarcity. And then we made sure that we covered the geography of Australia and also organisational spread. So that meant we had motivated applicants. Then we went through a 3-day intensive training, so one in Sydney and one in Melbourne, and people from other regions flew in. We had 48 participants as, I guess, that vanguard. And whilst we trained them, we assessed them. So, learning from better behind there, we were assessing the participants for the potential. So we then had a base of trained consultants across the firm and the country, and we'd done some talent identification. So then the do one was all about them bringing those people we'd trained into real life projects with clients. So there was further upskilling, but also further assessment of attitude and aptitude. From there, we were able, from that 48, to select 12 to 18 people to take through a train the trainer program, because we had to keep training the rest of the firm, which, as well as management consulting, included audit and tax. And as much as I would have loved to have done that, I wouldn't have hit my KPIs and, I would have been out. So we trained them up and then freed up my time to focus on keep working with clients. And then we were able to scale it and roll it across the firm. So they delivered that to, like I said, right across the firm, keep working with people and culture. And, that was fantastic. And I guess for me, that was something that I could leave behind when I left after 3 years. What are some of the lessons learned from that? I wish I'd built a stronger community of practice there with regular get-togethers. And that was a time pressure thing, which is why it wasn't done. But it probably should have been a priority in hindsight. That would have really helped scale it and build that community. Obviously, the first lot of the trainer session, we handpicked those, but then after that, we didn't, and so I guess there was some dilution in training expertise and therefore impact as it was rolled out across the firm. So staying closer to the selection and development of the trainer participants for subsequent cohorts would have been really good. So that's probably pretty rapid fire. Going through those 4 critical steps in terms of setting up your skeleton team, setting your strategy, to design we must sell, and then resourcing to scale up. So as I said, if you'd like, send me a message. You can email me, send me a message on LinkedIn, whatever. I'd love to send you a free copy. You're not going to go into a database of our digital design thinking method cards. So there's 40 tools there. And if you want to get a copy of my book, you can get it from my website, but if you're overseas, it's probably a lot easier to go to, your Amazons or whatever to do that. So thanks everyone. And Anna Maria, open to questions.
Yes. So I'm killing the presentation here. Thank you so much, Nathan. I took some notes and we already have some questions in the chat. Now we have 15 more minutes to go. So if there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now, or also use the queue button, just like so, to queue yourself up, and then you'll get the mic and be able to ask Nathan a question. So Ricard is asking in the chat. I don't know, Ricard, do you want to take the mic and share that out loud? I see it. No, you can read it. What areas of the business and roles did you have in the expert group at the CBA in the example you shared, Nathan?
Yeah, good question. So we were external trainers. So that was a collaboration. So through UTS, the University of Technology in Sydney, and we came in, we designed the program, and then delivered it. Yeah.
All right. Is the question answered, Ricard? Do you want to add something?
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I just couldn't unmute myself. I was curious to know that group of people that you had at CBA when you looked at selecting, or those groups that were part of the program. Which areas of the business did you have? I mean, did you start with a lot of the, say, designers and product managers and so on, or did you have people in risk and, to distribution and whatnot? I was just curious to know what that,
Yeah.
what the craft was, and also the level of seniority. So, with different levels, or, I think you mentioned that you try to work with the more the influencers, probably the more senior folks, but I was just curious to know that selection process was.
Yeah. So they, there were 5K. So it was working with their people and culture team within CBA, and they identified 5 capabilities that they should build to stay as a technology leader in the financial services space. So they were design thinking, experimentation, agile, lean, and then data analytics feeding into all of those. And the other 4 are sort of in some ways, sequential. So the people and culture team, and it was just the technology group. And look, great opportunity, but that was a little bit of the downside. It wasn't cross-functional as ideally it would be, but from there it became more cross-functional. But they mapped those 4,000 to 5,000 people within the technology group and worked out who was expert, who was advanced, who was sound and aware. It was like you were saying, who could have an influence and help grow design thinking or experimentation across the organization. But then making sure you had a good mix as well. So it wasn't, say, all business analysts and not enough, architects or whatnot. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Right. Paul, mic's coming your way. Take it away.
Thanks both, and thanks Nathan again for sharing. Apologies, I've got a bit of a cold, so apologies that I'm a bit grainy coming here from England. Just a couple of quick questions, Nathan. So a bit of background, I'm just about to move into a new role where I'll be heading up what's going to be called an innovation and insights team to support essentially our learning designers. So it's going to be in the learning space, but I'll be heading up a team that's responsible for innovation and insights. And I guess I had 2 sorts of questions. One was around your first steps as you were heading into some of these clients. What were some of the key things that you did if you're starting with a blank canvas? Because part of me is I'm really excited by this role, but then part of me is I'm gonna have people going to be working into me. How do I define their roles so they feel like they can contribute something? How do you get that sort of ways of working? And then the second thing around that was what I'm finding is sessions like today are fantastic. I'm reading so much, but how do you capture things so you can then prioritize it? What sort of format or methods did you use to sort of help your team then get on board with your thinking and in that mindset too?
Yeah, definitely. And look, and often you inherit some team members too, and they might be great, but they don't want to work for you, or they're better suited to work somewhere else. So it's sort of mapping the team that you're starting with and what you want to do. So I think it's to start with this, like with any of those skeleton teams, it's having an idea of what you're wanting to achieve, and therefore what are the key capabilities and possibly roles to do that. And then, do you have the people already who are doing those, and where are the gaps and how can you fill those? So, back at KPMG, we wanted to grow quickly. So, the acquisition of the research company was part of that, but it also filled a big gap. But then, and so, whilst there was funding, there wasn't necessarily funding for me to go out and just, hire a lot of people. So I was able to hire some people, but the rest I knew was going to be about training, critical mass so we could then deliver on projects. So you got to be, I think, flexible in your approach, depending on your budget and things like that. Yeah, and look, I don't know, I'm probably not the best example. You know, I've lots of ideas, and it's hard to keep track of them and therefore implement them and follow them through. But I mean, I've got a big whiteboard over here which I find useful. So you know, capturing things on there, whether you want to use a Kanban type idea or you know, or technique, that can be quite useful. Yeah.
Cheers, thank you.
Yeah, and my so my wife now, she used to live in Reigate, so she'd pick me up from Moulton-on-Thames, and she'd call and put her order in for what ice cream she wanted. I'm just noting your comment from earlier, and yeah, so is it Magnum tonight or is it Cornetto or whatever for the drive home? So yeah, the Unilever shop was pretty good.
My wife worked at the Unilever in Sydney for a period, actually. So I used to meet her on the street and say, "Can you bring me something down from the freezer as well?"
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, Paul, anything else here? Any follow-up questions? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I do. Hi, Nathan. How you going?
Good, you?
Yeah, good to see you. I just had a question when you flashed up that slide and you made the joke about, you know, managing a high-level product like sort of waterfall. Because I guess, yeah, it's sort of a mix of both, right? And how do you manage, like, you've got an MVP product and you actually want to move that in a very linear fashion from MVP 1 to 2 to 3 and sort of grow and enhance it, but your day-to-day work might be more agile because you've got a couple of products you're moving through that growth of MVP to sort of future state. And so how do you manage that?
Yeah. It's funny, I have a few jokes about agile, but I've got a sign above my coffee machine. I'll try and remember what it says now. I think it says, "Drink coffee, do crazy shit faster with more fun." I go, "Oh, that sounds like agile." And, you know, I heard they're going to use agile to build a bridge, the second harbour bridge across Sydney. So that'd be interesting. But then I was thinking, will it have the loops like a slot car set? You know, that could be quite fun. But no, in all seriousness, you know, and I don't work at the you know, the back end development area as much. I'm more on the front end of the innovation journey. But, you know, when I think of the design thinking stages, if you're comfortable with me calling them those, they are quite linear. Because if you think of agile, it's about sprints and shipping stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to ship some insights and then ship some ideas and then, you know, ship some concepts. You're actually going to do your insights. And yeah, you might go back if you haven't got enough insight, but you're probably going to keep going through to ideas and then concepts and then test those. Then where I see agile coming in is then when you get into experimentation. So you're then looking at the whole business model and desirability, feasibility, and viability. So when I get to that stage, we're then running regular cycles or cadences of de-risking your solution and business model and validating and invalidating all your hypotheses. So I think it's quite linear. Then experimentation, so still pre-business case, it's using agile. And then when you go into development, yeah, if you're going to be launching, you know, minimal viable products, or you're going to be launching stuff that you're going to sell, but it's not the final product, then I think, you know, agile can work. It can vary a little bit by, you know, what industry you're in and things like that. So when we launched our ice cream at Unilever or whatever, it wasn't MVP 1. Well, it was, and that was it. You know, there wasn't necessarily MVP 2, 3, or 4. You know, it was Cornetto chocolate, and that was it, so to speak. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, then I guess how do you manage like a portfolio of these products that you're kind of growing? You know, like, so you might have launched with just vanilla, but you want to roll out chocolate, honeycomb, blah blah blah, like, and they're all kind of on their own path or trajectory. But yeah.
So you want awesome project managers, and you want to hire people who, you know, have strengths that you don't have. But you know, I mean, if I look at, I think consumer goods does it really well. So, you know, you have the core, the marketing team who looks after existing products, and it might be in their role to develop new products. Or there might be a distinct team, but who aren't too separate, who are then developing new products for those core marketers are involved. So when you're launching it, they're ready to take over and they buy into it. So it's in a way having two teams, having a core or BAU team as well as an innovation team, but they're not isolated or separated, and that's where I think it goes wrong when we build up these, secret labs, and they're disconnected from the organization, the rest of the business.
Yeah. Well, they can't hand over.
Yeah.
Lose that thread.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Thanks, Nathan.
And ideally, they would report through to, I'd say, one person probably.
Yeah. Okay. Those ones that implementing and
and then they're looking at today and tomorrow, and making sure there's no fights and everyone gets resources and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right, and we've got about time for one last question. So, Honey, you have 2 questions in the chat. Pick one. Feel free to also unmute and ask. The second one, please. Okay, cool. How to establish methods or tools to make sure the trainees and participants are progressing to keep their motivation and internal momentum?
How to develop tools to do that. I'm not sure what the question is there. Happy to open it up to the floor, or Hanny, if you want to explain it a little bit more. I mean, we always want to keep learning. I mean, I'd say that.
I think it comes more from maintaining that momentum once the participants start that journey, and perhaps it's more around having a toolkit available to those trainers, and perhaps it's just programs of where you have champions or you're coaching each other and helping those that are starting that journey. That's sort of how I read that question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. And I think building that community of practice really helps, which, I could have done more of, I think, in KPMG. In Commonwealth Bank, I think they did it quite well. I know in, there's different communities of practice, especially actually in government in Australia, and state government and things like that. They do that well as well. I think it's also it's almost that see one, do one, lead one, or train one model, which we did with KPMG. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post just on my own journey from, how I progressed through that to what I'm doing now. Ed, I think I don't know if you've read that. I might be putting you on the spot. I was going to say, is it if you did read it, is it helpful, or is it actually, should we not be recommending it to people to read?
Oh no, yeah, it was really good. Yeah, I definitely took bits out of that to push things internally to try launch like the community of practice and get some design thinking training in. Yeah.
But yeah, having the tools and that is also very helpful. So I mean, we develop method cards, both physical and digital, and those sorts of things as well. I mean, people still love the the physical and the tactile nature of the method cards. Which is pretty cool.
I've still got mine.
There you go.
They live on my desk.
Fantastic.
It's just sometimes you're stuck on a problem and it's just like going back to basics, and you just flip through and you're like, oh yeah, this is where we're at.
Yeah. And you can see them all, whereas even if you've got 2 screens that you work on, it's still limited. So yeah, the digital is good at times, but yeah, I think the physical is great too.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Nathan. Thanks for the great questions, everyone. A quick poll as a checkout for us. Well, for each and one of us, something you'll explore going forward, an insight, something that stuck with you, whether it's through reading, through changing something in practice in the way you do things. Feel free to use the poll to the left side of your screen. Nathan, again, thank you for taking the time to spend this hour with us, share so many great examples from your past experience with different companies. This was really insightful. Thanks everyone for joining, for taking the time, and for the great questions. I popped Nathan's LinkedIn in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out. and check out his book and the method cards, and enjoy the rest of your day, or have a good night, a restful evening for those of you living in Australia. And a big round of applause. There we go. The soundboard is enabled, by the way, for everyone, if you want to just smash those buttons and show Nathan how much you've appreciated his his time. All right. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you very, very soon. Bye, everyone.